Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to a conversation with the Problem Solvers Caucus, hosted by the Institute of Politics and Public Service, which many of you may know as Geopolitics, Punchbowl News, and the Georgetown Bipartisan Coalition. My name is TJ McCundon, and I have the privilege of serving as the president of the Georgetown Bipartisan Coalition, a student group committed to promoting dialogue and goodwill between students of different political backgrounds on the Hilltop. In many ways, our group sees the Problem Solvers Caucus as our role model, and hosting our special guest today has been a longtime goal of ours. We all share a commitment to the idea that, though we may not always agree on every issue, we are made better as politically active members of society by listening to and learning from different perspectives. It is a great honor to be able to hear from those who exemplify this tradition at the highest level. Joining us today are Democratic Representative Josh Gottheimer from New Jersey and Republican Representative Tom Reed from New York. Together, they serve as the co-chairs of the Problem Solvers Caucus, a group consisting of an equal number of Republicans and Democrats in the House who are committed to finding common ground on many of the key issues facing the nation. The conversation will be moderated by Anna Palmer, founder and CEO of Punchbowl News and a spring 2017 Geopolitics Fellow, and Mo Alethi, Executive Director of Geopolitics. Please join in the conversation by tagging @Geopolitics and @Punchbowl News on Twitter. With that, over to you, Anna and Mo.
Thanks, TJ. Thanks for the great introduction. Thanks for your leadership, you and the Bipartisan Coalition. I was thinking the other day, I wish you guys had been around back when I was a Georgetown student, because it might have set me on a better path of than what I did during my 20 years in politics. So thank you for all that you do. Thanks to Georgetown College Democrats, Georgetown College Republicans for also joining us. And a special thanks to Punchbowl News. If you guys aren't subscribers, you ought to be. Anna is and her partners over there are some of the best journalists. We were thrilled to have her as a fellow a few years ago. And their newsletter every morning has become one of my must reads every single day to get a good sense as to what's going on in Washington. So Anna, we're thrilled to have you join us.
Glad to be here.
And Congressman Reed and Gottheimer, we are thrilled to have this conversation with you. Here's how this is going to work. For the first part of the conversation, 20, 25 minutes or so, Anna and I are going to have a conversation with both congressmen, and then we will begin to take student questions. If you are a student watching here in the Zoom, look at the little Q&A tab at the bottom of the screen, click that, submit your question, someone will let you know. And then we'll bring you up on screen to ask your question directly. Feel free to start populating that tab with your questions now. So let's hop to it. I want to start kind of big picture. Politics it's always been polarized, right? We've always had sharp elbows in politics. But we're coming off of a period, if we're coming off of it at all, where we just seem hyper polarized. President Biden made his campaign and his transition and his inaugural address really about the concept of American unity. But there seems to not necessarily be consensus on what that means, right? We're not even unified in what unity means. And so I'm wondering, as the co-chairs of the Problem Solvers Caucus, representing both major parties, take a stab at that. What are we talking about when we talk about national unity?
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for the invite to be here with you, and to the Bipartisan Coalition of Georgetown, and to you, Anna and Mo, and for putting this together with my friend Josh, who is my best friend in Congress, and we spend hours together and weeks together trying to come to common ground. And we do that, by the way, you just introduced us here, TJ, by listening to each other, respecting each other, trusting each other. And so I look forward to this conversation today, and to all you at Georgetown that are committed to having this type of dialogue, to learning the lessons that I think we have forgotten here in America, especially now as I go on college campuses across the country. And I often see that there's kind of not this welcoming of this dialogue, of this ability to really have an exchange of ideas, an exchange of information and points of view. I got a child now who is in his third year of college, a daughter who just recently graduated from college. And I can tell you, they have often come to me and shared with me the pressure they felt to speak up, to engage in dialogue. And that's just them speaking honestly to me about what their experiences was. And that's something we have to fight. We have to make sure that we have the ability to have this dialogue in an open and honest way. And so I applaud those universities and those forums that do that. And it goes to your question, Mo, what is unity right now in America? And I think there's a couple points of view that I bring to this that I say unity isn't something that we don't do in Problem Solvers Caucus. We don't go into Problem Solvers Caucus saying, you know, I'm a Democrat or I'm a Republican, come to my idea, come to my side of the aisle and stand with me. We don't do it that way. What we do is we go into the forum with the idea that I'm a proud Republican. I'm not bashful of my ideology. I'm not bashful of my philosophy. I'm not bashful of me having the Republican brand when I cast my vote on the floor of the House. I'm not afraid of that. Josh is a proud Democrat. He is a proud member of the Democratic Party. And what we do, however, is we stay in the room as proud Republicans and proud Democrats, and we challenge each other. We listen to each other. We trust each other that we can have the dialogue. And then what we end up having is a dialogue where sometimes we do scream at each other. Sometimes we get into passionate disagreements. Josh and I have had our wives that come in and go, what are you guys talking about? Why are you guys arguing or raising your voices with each other? But at the end of the day, I know his heart is good. He knows my heart is good. And what we're trying to do is find where we can find that common ground, that common soil that allows us to find the 80% position of commonality that we share as Americans. And that's what I think is unity. That's what I think is what the country is yearning for, is for leaders to lead folks on both sides of their aisle and say, it's okay. It's okay to disagree. As I was sharing with Anna and Mo before I came into this forum, I have 11 older brothers and sisters who was raised by a single mom when my father passed when I was 2. Our household didn't work because we all got along magically. We disagreed and we fought like cats and dogs. But mom always said, you kids figure it out and make it work. That's the same type of thing we do in Problem Solvers Caucus. And I think that's where the country is at not right now, demanding, hey, you know what? We got a lot of problems. COVID-19 is a crisis. And what we need to do is figure it out by working together. And the only way you do that is not by forcing someone to come to your side of the aisle and say, this is the right way. It's listening to each other and saying, you know what? That's a good point. And your point's a good point. And we can find where the commonality is. And that's the unity that can make us strong going forward.
Yeah, Congressman Gottheimer, I'd love your take on the whole unity question, but I want to throw out another thing as well. Our institute has been doing polling for the past 2 years or so on the issue of civility in politics. How bad do people think it is? Who do they blame? Do they really want it? And there's one data point in there that always strikes me. And the most recent one, which we were in the field in early January, we asked people to agree or disagree with the following statement. Common ground and compromise are noble goals that we want our leaders to aspire to. 88% of Americans say they agree with that. But the very next question, agree or disagree. I am tired of leaders compromising on my values. I want them to stand up and fight the other side. 87% say they agree with that. How do you walk that line as you're trying to figure this out when your constituents are saying both, I want you to compromise, but not really?
I love that because I've seen that and those questions before. By the way, thank you, Professor Lethe, for having me. I appreciate it. And Anna, thanks for having us. And by the way, I love that opening and the fact that there is a place in Georgetown that literally focuses on bringing people together of different political stripes that gives me a lot of faith and hope. So thank you for what you're doing and what you're guiding, Mo and Georgetown there, because I think that we need a lot more of that in this country. And that gets to kind of the point. People are sick and tired, in my opinion, at least from folks that I talk to every day in my district or people I meet. They're sick and tired of people screaming and yelling at each other, right? I mean, it's and the nasty tweets. And I know, listen, it gets people to click on these things and it gets you to watch TV. And as Anna or others will tell you, listen, the food fight is what sells. And right, what Tom and I regularly do, which is spend hours together on the phone with 56 members of Congress, 28 Democrats and 20 Republicans, like we did just an hour ago, talking about where we can actually find agreement. I get it. That's less exciting, right, than the NASCAR crash, as Tom always says. That's why people watch it going around and round. They're waiting for the crash to occur. And my little boy Ben, we go to hockey games, or when we used to be able to go to hockey games, and all he wants to know about is when the fight's going to happen. And so in that culture, when you dig down and talk to people, yeah, they want you to, of course, find common ground, but they also want you to stand up for what you believe in. And I think it's a false choice to claim that you can't do both, I guess, is the short answer to that poll and to my question, and to your question, Mo, that you can, of course, fight like hell for what you believe in, and you should, and for what's best for the people you represent. But you also can understand that you can take 80% of what you want and what you fought for versus insisting on 100% and getting nothing. And that's, our whole premise, because part of our rules in the Problem Solvers Caucus is when we get to 75% of us agreeing, we agree to stand together and vote together as a block. And so it's 56 members stand together. Now, getting to 75%, it's hard enough in Congress to get two people to agree with each other of the same party, let alone try to get 56 people, 3/4 of 56 people. What we find is that, and Tom made this point, which is, I think, critically important, and I've learned this now from doing this for 4 years, that my preconceived notions are often wrong of what I think the other side thinks. And what I've learned to do is really listen to what the other side is saying. And so in other words, and you're not going to get this from watching cable news, right? It's because that's just all soundbite culture. What you get is if you sit in a room or on a Zoom for an hour and you debate an issue and you really listen to what the other side is saying and what their hangups are, it's amazing that you can actually solve for far more things than you thought you could, Mo, to your point, without compromising what you believe in, right? Oh, I saw all the time, I didn't realize that's your issue. Oh, I can fix that, right? I can address that. I think we can find common ground there. Tom and I always have these epiphanies with each other, and I'll say to him, really? That's your beef? Like that's your holdup? Oh, we can get around that. We can make that work. And I think that's what I've learned through this whole process, that people actually want you to move the ball forward. They don't want to just hire you and send you to Washington and scream and yell and get nothing done. I mean, also, who wants to be, we did this thing earlier today with former Speaker Ryan and Leader Gephardt. And one of the things I found so profound is they both kind of said separately, like, who wants to go to Washington to do nothing? Like, what's the point? Why would you go and we leave our families every week. We go there to Washington. It's not exactly always all people think it is. When you're there, you're as you guys know, you're working all the time. And why not try to actually get something done? And so what I've learned through this process, and I think Tom has too, and I couldn't ask for a better partner than Tom Reed. I mean, yeah, we disagree probably on three, if we actually policy set them next to each other, we probably disagree on a lot more stuff than we agree on. But what we always are able to do is find the places and look for those places where we can agree. And we talk to each other with civility, Mo. Like we're civil. The discourse is civil. When we talk to each other, it's constructive. No one's nasty. Even when we disagree, we try to really do it in a respectful way. And not gotcha stuff with each other. And if people could get a view of our meetings, like late at night, often when we meet for hours on end and debate things and put up whiteboards and do this stuff, I think you'd have a heck of a lot more faith in the system and a lot more hope that now that we're, as President Biden said, trying to unite and repair the breach, because we've got a lot of breaches to repair right now, that we can get past it and move forward.
Just a reminder to the students, you can submit your questions at the Q&A tab at any point during the program. Feel free to start now. Let me toss it over to Anna to ask a couple of questions before we turn it over to students.
Thanks, Mo. Hey guys, I appreciate it. And just for the students, if you don't subscribe to Punchbowl News, I have to get at least one full plug in. You can subscribe at punchbowl.news. It's free in the morning, and we kind of set the table for what's happening and what Washington insiders are thinking about. So I have two questions, and I think both of you know that myself and my writing partner, Jake Sherman, me hopefully a little bit nicer than Jake, a little bit snarkier, are often skeptical of these bipartisan groups, right? Like, I think they make for really good, opposite, good TV, probably great fundraising, corporate America. People want to feel like people are coming together, but rarely do things actually get done. Yes, you guys kind of come together, but you haven't made the choice to be like the Freedom Caucus, which said, we're going to kind of hold leadership hostage if they don't, go our way. Are you ever going to employ more hardline tactics to get what you want done?
Yeah, I'll definitely go forward with the first. Look what we did in the $900 billion that we've delivered in the COVID relief package and how we got that done in regards to pushing that forward. We made it essentially politically unsustainable for our leadership not to get something done. And we pushed them from a positive direction to say that we couldn't stay in that position of doing nothing any longer. And I will tell you, one of the things I learned early in my career, I've been in Congress now going 10 years, 11 years now. When you get the power of the people behind you, it is amazing how much you can move the leadership your way. And as we're seeing more and more, and you're seeing the leadership and you see the political campaigns, our language of problem solving, our language of where the American people are coming and saying, look, enough is enough. We're sick and tired of the screaming and the yelling and the 5-second sound bites on cable TV. They want something done. So you're starting to see leadership be in a position that has to respond to our position of getting something done. But to your point about hardball tactics, we have fought this for quite some time, Anna. It's easy to blow the place up. I came through the evolution of the Tea Party, came in with Tea Party support, still have Tea Party support as we go forward, just as an aside. And we've talked about, do you want to become the caucus of no? Freedom Caucus, got to give them credit. They were very, very effective at influencing the body by being a block of no votes, but they could never deliver the yes votes. And we had Speaker Ryan on today. Paul came in and talked to us, and he underappreciated us back in his speakership. But now he does appreciate what we have put together here, because what we're delivering is we can be a block of playing hardball, if you would, but we can deliver the votes from the other side, because DC is all about 218 votes and 60 votes in the Senate. Now in this COVID bill, it's 50 votes in the Senate. But you can influence the no in regards to, we won't allow something to happen on the floor, but we can also come in and say, here's 28 votes for a yes, to be a yes factor. And most of us as members want to get something done. So as we come in with we don't want to go down this path, we also now have a block of votes that could come in and say, we want to be a yes. Look at what we did on the humanitarian aid bill back in 4th of July before COVID, where you had a humanitarian aid crisis at the border. And we were not happy when they had a 90-vote bill passed in the Senate. And we were going to go home for another month and watch a few thousand people die if we did nothing. And we said, you know what, that's not right. We want to be part of the solution to get humanitarian aid. And we got $14 billion flowing to the border in 72 hours. And we saved lives by doing that. That's very rewarding to a member of Congress. We did that in our group. Now, not everybody was happy with that from our various perspectives on both sides of the aisle. But for the sake of those people and for doing what was right and for the sake of moving that forward, we did it. So I think you're going to see us use our influence, not from playing hardball, but use it for an influence of good and saying, you know what, not only we're going to say we're not going down this path, we're going to go down this path in a positive way with a positive outcome. So just keep an eye on us. That's where the $900 billion came from.
We will. I want to ask you, because there's so many questions. I know Mo wants to get to the students, which is awesome. I want to ask one more question, then I'll turn it back to him. Congressman Gottheimer, I'd love you to project forward. We're always looking at what's next. You have COVID relief, infrastructure. What role will the problem solvers play? Are there any issues in particular that you already feel like, to Congressman Reed's point, to a point of yes, you're going to be pushing, kind of proactively?
Infrastructure, I think immigration are two that we think are coming up. Police reform will come up and be something that we get actively involved in. I think things related to the environment, depending upon how they're structured, will be areas where we get involved. And we work best, I think, when things are stuck and where we can come in and where there's some tension that we can address and bring people together. And obviously, with a 4-seat majority in the House and a 50-50 Senate, there's going to be a lot of things that are going to be where there's going to be some friction, and I think that's where we can really and to your last point, your last question, I think we really try to come in from a positive. How do we solve this so that we can move forward versus how do we blow stuff up? And it's much easier just to say no and blow things up than it is to actually fix it, as and move forward. And people forget that. And so I know the Freedom Caucus and others deploy that tactic. But so you can get to a few votes, you say no, you take it down. But it's the extra step is actually the challenging part.
Can I have a 10-second question, which is just, okay, the Sweet 16, that's what we're calling them, the gang in the Senate. How much interaction are you having with them?
I don't like that Sweet 16 name, I know you gave it to them.
I know.
Common Sense Coalition that they're calling themselves.
I mean, Sweet 16 is a lot better. Come on, it's a lot catchier. How much interaction are you having with them? I mean, do you see this as like the two groups?
Talk to them. One of the best things that came out of relationships that we've developed in the last year, and then the $900 billion package where we talked to them. Tom and I were on a call with them every day from Thanksgiving to the end of the year, or on Zoom like this. And usually members of the Senate don't talk to, the lowly congressmen. We're just usually getting their coffee. But we really developed an unbelievable working relationship. We talk to them all the time, regularly have meetings with them. And I foresee that to be a very positive, constructive relationship that we'll continue to have. Think of them as like a sister organization to us.
And also, we learned from the White House administration with President Trump, having the relationship with the White House is very important, and they get this. Because like with Trump, with criminal justice reform, we worked behind the scenes on that because it was the right thing to do. And we're having the conversations with Mark Meadows and others, not surprising anybody, being a conduit of trying to get things done. So with the Biden administration, I so appreciated the White House reaching out to us, having their first couple of meetings with us in the Problem Solvers Caucus. Because if their agenda is going to be successful, they're going to have to get 60 votes in the Senate, 218 votes in the House, and there's only so much you can do on a partisan track before it breaks apart. I've watched this play so many times. Josh and I have had this conversation, and the legacy legislation, President Trump's legacy legislation is going to be criminal justice reform. People don't even know he passed it. But that's going to be the legacy legislation that survives the test of time because it's done on a bipartisan basis. And we were a part of getting that done. Many players involved in that, but we were a critical piece of that successfully getting taken care of. And look at what that did. There are a lot of lives improved for the good as a result of criminal justice being signed into law.
So we're going to go to students in a second, but I want to ask one more question before we do. So our institute is part of Georgetown's McCourt School of Public Policy. The whole reason the McCourt School exists is to teach future policymakers about evidence-based policymaking, right? Like that's the mantra, evidence-based policymaking. But man, does it seem, at least as an outsider watching what's going on the Hill, right? That like we're not even agreeing on facts. We're not even agreeing on basic facts. And look at what happened over the past few months. We can't even agree on the basic fact of who won an election. And when so many people are calling that into question, including, honestly, a few members of the Problem Solvers Caucus who voted to object to the certification, how do you navigate that? How do you work around that when people are just coming with completely different realities to try to solve a problem?
Well, I think you come at it one. You still don't give up faith and you don't judge people. Once you start judging people, you immediately repel people. They get very defensive. They won't engage. And so like even in the Problem Solvers Caucus, the folks who voted to object to the Electoral College and that type of thing, they came at it from an interpretation of the Constitution I adamantly disagree with, but I didn't judge them. And we were able to keep our group together because look, they came to their conclusion. We may disagree with it, but they came to their conclusion. And then others, for whatever reason, they came to that conclusion across the country. And trust me, as I said, I still have Tea Party support with folks in our district. I have gone through the process of sitting down with them, taking the time to go through and why their conclusion was based on misinformation they got or things that they were not privy to, they didn't have access to, or that they just didn't take the time to do that extra work. They just got to a conclusion and they just solidified their position. Doesn't mean I'm ever going to convince them otherwise. They've got to that conclusion. They've gone from there. But I continue to engage with them because I don't give up hope that going forward, we're going to have to engage with them in the future and say, okay, this is your conclusion here. President Biden is now our president. We can continue to fight that fight. That's where, if they want to spend their time, that's where they're going to spend their time. My hope is we move forward. And if they're good-hearted people, they're goodwill folks, they start looking at the information, they start looking at the evidence, and not only do they close that out or they move past it, the next time they get confronted with this maybe misinformation or other issues, they have the self-awareness to say, you know what, I'm going to trust but verify. The old Ronald Reagan, we need more of that in our society. We need more of that trust but verify, because right now we got too much of it. It's too much. If it's on the internet, it's true type of thing. And people, it's just tough to do the hard work of getting the information, getting a solid underpinning, and engaging in a respectful dialogue where you can question each other and not judge each other.
I also
judge each other.
Tom, if it's okay.
Yeah.
One thing, I would just say that it's, believe me, I was not exactly pleased with some of my colleagues. And, I'm trying to be un-Jersey here and how I feel. And, you have you're going to get angry and, and I believe, I was in the chamber on the 6th and, with a gas mask and on the ground. With an angry mob banging on the door and shots fired. That doesn't leave you overnight. And also what led up to that doesn't, that's not something you just let go of. You remember it. And I think my approach has been with my colleagues, and there's those who, if we find out we're involved at a level of organizing it, that's a whole different, you have investigations. That's a whole different set of facts that you see if that happened. In the meantime, and Tom is spot on here, you have to, for the sake of the country, figure out how to move forward. And you have accountability. There's obviously measures going on in accountability right now with what's going on in the Senate with impeachment and other measures of accountability with members' comments. But the bottom line is, are you, and this is what Tom and I both said to each other, you have to listen, you have to talk to one another, you have to really understand where members are coming from, even when you strongly disagree. And obviously you hear Tom strongly disagrees with the choice of some of our colleagues, as did I. And then you decide, well, are they committed, and this is particularly in the problem solvers for our members, are they committed to recognizing, obviously we have a new administration, but to working with the new administration and working with one another and all the branches of government to make progress for the country and to put country first. And that's really because I know a lot of my colleagues are saying, well, I'm just not going to work with anyone else again. And we have a lot of work to do for the country. So I don't know, that would to me would be an irresponsible to pack up and walk away as much as sometimes I want to, because of how pissed you get, right? But the responsibility for the job you sign up for is to stay at the table and to keep moving forward. And I think it's not easy. If you're a human being, it's not easy sometimes to do that. But I really think, And that's something that you learn in life. You learn, I worked in the private sector, you learn that in business, you learn that in your personal life, right? Sometimes you just you have to talk it out, try to figure out try to understand where the other person is coming from as best you can. And then hopefully there's accountability, and then you try your best to move forward. And I think, at least that's me, that's personally how I'm trying to approach this. And you look at historically people like Lincoln at the end of the Civil War, with the 14th Amendment and the decision to say people take 10%, take an oath, they're going to come back to the Union. And if you look at what he said at the time, what was more important was the sake of the Union than punishing others, right? For the sake of the country. And I think we're at a moment where, and this is, again, I'm still working through this, but for the sake of the country, we've got to figure out a way. We have so much work to do to come together. So.
All right, thank you for that. While I believe Anna is one of the best interviewers in the business, now we're going to get to the really good questions from the students. When I call on you, introduce yourself, who you are, what your Georgetown affiliation, and where you're zooming in from, then dive into your question. So our first question comes from Dominic.
Hello, my name is Dominic. I'm an SFS student, class 2024. I'm from the great old state of Ohio, as we all know, the greatest state in America, except for all the other states, Ohio. I'm from Cleveland. I like a lot of people, was kind of embarrassed by the January 6th attack. And I genuinely had a moment of concern about this country. I looked at it and I saw the attack, and I was wondering, how do we prevent this from ever happening again? Because in one moment, 200 years of history in a lot of ways was undone. We had this tradition of peaceful transfer of power. I mean, America has had a lot of problems. No one's going to deny that. We haven't done the most. There's some things that obviously we're not proud of in this country, but the one thing about going with it, and I worry about it not just for this country, but around the world. This week, Myanmar had a coup d'etat. And Myanmar, not a perfect country by any means, but they making some progress towards democracy. But this undermining of confidence in elections and in the government and the rule of law has really changed things in Myanmar. And I worry, how does the U.S. maintain its role as the model for the world when we can't even figure out our own things? We can't even figure out how to hold ourselves accountable.
Well,
Congressman Reed, do you want to take first crack at
sure,
that?
I can take a stab at that. Well, first of all, we got two choices, right? I mean, you got two choices from January 6th, and I sat and I was 15 minutes off the floor walking back to my office that I just left, and I got locked out of my building when the mob was coming up around the corner from the Senate side of the building. So I was locked out in the middle of all that. And then I went back to my office and watched it on TV. Josh and I talked to each other, make sure we were safe. That was important to both of us to make sure we were good. But and I watched it with tears in my eyes. I watched it with tears in my eyes like everyone else. I said, never in my life did I think America would come to that amount of anger because those folks that were part of that mob had an anger that drove that day. And they thought violence is where they had to go in order to preserve their vision of where they wanted America, that what they were fighting for, if you would. I'm not rationalizing it. I'm not accepting it. It was completely offensive to me, but I was very saddened. And then you had two choices to face, in my opinion, when I looked at that, was do you give up or do you re-engage? And I will tell you, what I chose was to re-engage. That's why that night I was so proud to be part of the voices in Congress to say, they wanted us to go off-site. They wanted us to go to our secret locations to complete the conduct of democracy and do the transition of power that evening, not go to the Senate chamber, not go to the House chamber to do the votes. They wanted us to go to the secure locations and do it. And we all kind of went back and said, no, we need to go back to the chambers and do this. And then when I walked into the floor, I said, Josh, we have to do something together. And we did a speech together that flew across the country. And that was done on no moments planning. There was no planning to that. We didn't even know we were going to speak. We were scrambling as we walked in to get time. And I said, Josh, I think I got us 5 minutes. And he's like, well, when do we go? I go, we're going in about 2 speakers. We're like third in line. Let's I don't know what we're going to do. And we're handwriting like little notes to each other, even how to convene the thing. But anyway, and I made a commitment there was, you know what, now's the time to send a message to the country of the message that, and I physically walked across the floor of the chamber from the Republican side to the Democrat side. Again, not to become a Democrat, but as a proud Republican, going to the Democratic side to stand with my friend in Congress as an American and say, the mob didn't win, democracy will survive, and we're going to continue to have our fights, and we're not going to resort to violence. We're going to inspire the country to continue the debate that our founding fathers and my father, whose blood is in Europe and Korea still, fought for to make sure that we were free. That's what we have to move forward from, and we got resounding support for that. Josh stood there with me. We were in tears. And we were, we stood there to show that's what the beacon of hope to the world, not only to the country, to the whole world is that we survived this. And it also shows you how precious democracy is. Democracy is but one generation away from being lost, right? That's what our founders taught us. That's what each generation teaches us. That's why it's incumbent upon you. Don't yield to the pressure of the easy to say, you know what, I'm going to reject that other philosophy. I'm going to turn my back on that other philosophy, and I'm just going to judge it as something that I'm not going to accept. Understand where that other philosophy is coming from. Understand where that other voice is coming from. Try to listen to it. And that's why I applaud what you guys are doing here, because you're the next generation that has to make sure that this American experiment continues on going forward. So keep up on it. Don't give up on it. Don't just throw your hands up on it and say, it's my way or the highway. It's going to take all of us doing this together.
Thanks for the question, Dominic. Okay, next up, we've got a question from Tyler.
Hi there. And Representative Reed, thank you for the great segue into my question. The Lugar Center, in coordination actually with the McCourt School of Public Policy here at Georgetown, publishes a bipartisanship index for every member of Congress and every senator, I believe. And actually, Representative Gottheimer, I believe you had the highest score for the 116th Congress, or for 2020.
Don't blow up his ego. He's got a big enough ego.
And where was Reed on that scorecard?
I don't remember. I only saw your name at number 1. But my question for you, routinely, members of Congress under the age of 45 score significantly higher than those over the age of 45. And I was wondering if you two could speak to any differences in a generational gap that you see towards bipartisanship. And if you do see that, how can our generation sustain that bipartisan spirit in the coming decades?
It's a really good question. I know. And Reed, you got to go introduce an amendment.
I have to go do an amendment. I have to go legislate in front of the Ways and Means Committee. So I do know I have to leave. So Josh, please take that. But
I think you're going to try to come back if we still have a minute to get your amendment done. So I'm on the hot seat. Thanks, Reed. Nice to really leave me here with Anna Palmer. Jesus, come on. That's a really good question. Like I think there's certainly, one trend that I have noticed is that a lot of the newer members in the last 2 Congresses, and I came in 16. Reed's been around longer. I think this is his 7th term or 6th term. I can't remember. A lot of us were not in politics before. I'd never been in elected office. I mean, I had worked with people like Professor Lethe in prior lives in politics, but had never been in elected office. And there's a lot more people who actually are following that path. And whether that's been in response to the prior administration, and so you had people run, or just overall frustration with the way things are. And I've noticed that if you've not spent your life, running for dog catcher and then county exec and moving up that way, those members, whether they've been former military or private sector, they bring a little bit of a different approach to governing overall, and much more willing to question things and not simply accept the way things were for and Tom and I with the Problem Solvers last Congress had a huge fight and changed a bunch of the rules of the House of Representatives, because one of the big trends that's very frustrating to many of us is just how much power has been centralized out of the main office, out of leadership. And members, what ends up happening is that it's command and control from the top, and the rank and file member has over time less and less power. Committees, where used to do a lot of work, are now are more kind of being dictated by leadership, and a lot of the real work gets done behind the scenes, and committees don't have what we call regular order, a regular process on things. In fact, one of the frustrations right now with this current process of the legislation we're considering is just there's right now we're in committees, but there's not necessarily a lot of time for debate that's going on. So we have tried to change some of those. We've fought very hard to change things and say, well, members should have much more, rank and file members should have much more of a voice. And right now, I think you're going to see, Tyler, in this Congress, given how tight things are, that members, individual members, more rank and file members, will have much more of a voice, even if we don't have fancy offices.
Thanks for the question, Tyler. As the Congressman mentioned, he and I did used to work together in previous lives. And Josh, I got to say, you calling me professor sounds it sounds like you got about as much respect calling me professor as I do calling you congressman. So, and it's all deserved.
I figured
right.
I'd get it in, man.
Yeah, no, appreciate that. Okay, let's go to next up, Graham.
Hi there. My name's Graham Hillman. I am a freshman in the SFS, coming at you from Bethesda, Maryland, so pretty close to DC, as it were. My question is kind of, obviously we've had a lot of contentious political flashpoints in the past, several years that have resulted in a lot of, ruptures to unity in Congress at large. And my question is kind of, what have been some events and some incidents that have really inflamed tensions within the Problem Solvers Caucus, more than usual, and how have you been able to work to move past that? And I guess kind of a flip side I'll throw in there really quickly. What have been some surprising moments of unity that you've seen from people outside of the Problem Solvers Caucus, like maybe some people who you wouldn't usually consider to place a high premium on bipartisanship? Some surprising moments from them.
Well, I'll give you a surprising positive moment versus a negative moment on the caucus, if that's okay. So after there's it's Parkland's coming up, as you know, just next week. I think it's 3 years, if that's right. I think that's next week on the 16th, if I have that correct. And it was a very, for the country, it's called gut-wrenching, as you, I'm sure, probably remember when that happened, Graham, right? I mean, it's one of those things you don't forget. And I remember exactly where I was when I learned about it. And maybe that's because I'm a parent. I just can't imagine, what these families have gone through. And I remember a couple of Democratic members called me right after. And we were actually not in Washington when it happened, and called me right after and said, do you think the caucus could get together and do something on school safety, on gun safety? And, that's an issue that's very difficult. There's some issues that are just so ideologically embedded that it's really, you could spend 1,000 hours together in a room, and I don't care how many hours you spend together, you're not moving. It's really hard to move. And Tom and I had always thought things involving gun safety and in that realm were off limits, in the sense that it'd be one of those issues. So a couple members called me, and I'll never forget, I called Tom up and I said, hey, Tom, I know you're probably going to say it's not worth investing the hours in, but how would you feel if we tried to get together and see if we can get anywhere on gun safety. He said, it wasn't an immediate no. And he said, let me just call you back. And so he called some people, we each called different people on our side. He called me back about a half hour later and said, let's do it. We're in Washington, I think, starting tomorrow. Let's get together. And we all got into a room around 7 or 8 o'clock at night. And we spent about 4 or 5 hours together. And I'll never forget one member who's no longer a member. She said, started the conversation by saying, the key to gun control. And you heard a gasp from some of the Republicans. They said, please don't call it gun control. And she said, well, I'm just talking about school safety. The things school safety. They said, okay, can you talk about this as school safety and gun safety? Because, these words all have a different impact on all of us. And one of the things I've learned through this process is, of the impact of how you talk about things. And we then spent hours and hours and hours together on these issues and ended up getting behind a whole slate of reforms. I mean, not everything that I wanted, but we got behind a whole slate of reforms involving school safety and gun safety, of which several things actually got into law in terms of resource funding for more school safety, for NICS coordination, which is coordination between different law enforcement, different levels, resources for school resource officers and other things that came largely, and we talked to Paul Ryan at the time, that came from what we came as a group, a bipartisan group, were able to do. And I never thought in a million years that we could get there, and we did. And we've been able to do that on a lot of issues. And I'll never forget this summer after the legislation we passed on police reform out of the House, which was stuck in the Senate. Karen Bass called, and it's been reported about. She was head of the Congressional Black Caucus at the time. And this is where you're asking your second question about, and she, who's, by the way, wonderful, Karen Bass. I don't know if you've ever got a chance to spend time with her. She's just really a brilliant person, a good person. And she called and said, we're stuck on the Republican side of this thing going to the Senate. Would you sit down and meet on this and see if we could figure something out? Senator Scott had his package in the Senate. We spent the whole summer on it, months, and we actually came up with a lot of answers, a lot of places of agreement. There's 100 reasons why it ultimately didn't happen, but we were able to talk to each other and work together. And I realized, and what Karen said was amazing. These are people who just started talking and spending every day together for a couple hours a day. And we said, let's just let's talk for a couple more hours, Let's tackle little parts of the issue at a time. And we just, and then people get to know one another. And it's amazing, Graham, when you actually get to know each other, just like in school, right? I mean, you're a freshman, but think about it in high school, and hopefully once college gets back to normal, this will happen more. You spend time together and you get to build those relationships and you build trust with each other. And even if you disagree, you can say, well, it will not be as contentious. It'll actually be, you can find the areas where you can listen to one another and try to find some common ground. So thanks for the question.
Thanks for the question, Graham. We're getting close to the end of our time, so I want to try to squeeze in one more question and then give Anna a chance to come up or to ask a closing question. So next up, we've got Margie.
I'm a staff member. I work in Lowinger. And my question for you is a really simple one. Wouldn't the problem solvers be a more effective group if the table were bigger? If there were more people on the problem solvers?
That's a great question. It should actually just be called Congress. And I mentioned earlier, if you heard, either Tom and I were talking about the commitment that you've got to make. You got to show up every week. We have meetings. You've got to agree never to campaign against anybody else in the caucus. Can't write a check against anyone's opponents. And when we get to 75% of us agreeing, we stand together and vote together. So as you might imagine, not everyone's willing to do that. And we want you to do it. We only want you to show up if you're serious. And you always have to have one Democrat and one Republican, Noah's Ark rule. So, and as a result, there's people who believe in this and those who just ideologically don't, and we really, really take it seriously with who's at the table. You really have to be committed to this, because if you're not, A, you can't get to 75%, but B, it's not going to make for a lot of productive conversation. You have to buy into this whole idea that we believe is essential to governing. So
I think it's interesting is kind of building off of what you've been talking about in the last couple, right? Where you all trying to make an impact with leadership, centralized leadership. The speaker obviously controls so much power in the House compared to 20, 30 years ago. Do you think a member like yourself of the Problem Solvers Caucus could ever be part of leadership?
Man, that's a real stumper.
Because I assume most members have the ambition, right? You're a member to get things done, to be part of leadership, but it's somewhat.
I think some have an ambition to get things done, and sometimes that comports with being a member of leadership, and sometimes it doesn't. I don't know. It's a good question. None of our members have so far gone into leadership. I don't know if that's because we're doing this, so therefore it's not exactly leadership's not rolling out the carpet. We are very. I'm always very open and honest, and so is Tom with leadership. We don't believe in surprises, and that's not our style. And sometimes we get Christmas presents, and sometimes we don't. So depending upon the month. But I'd say that I don't see why we couldn't. And I think I wish we had some more people in leadership overall who were, and were believe fundamentally. And I think some I take that back. There are some members of leadership I know who I talk to who really, really believe in bipartisan governing. Steny, Hakeem, we talk regularly about this. I'm just thinking I've talked to them a lot about the importance of bringing Democrats and Republicans together, and how key that is. That's a conversation we've had quite a bit. And so I think you definitely could espouse that. People who have those views, whether somebody from the caucus would go into leadership is a really good question, but I don't see why not.
All right. TBD. Josh Gottheimer making him play, maybe.
Wait, I didn't say me. You said somebody in the caucus.
I know.
I heard that as an announcement. I don't know about you, Anna, but I definitely heard an announcement there.
Breaking news.
I think the problem is Anna's getting too much sleep these days. Exactly. She's good.
Something I've never been accused of since taking these kind of jobs. Anyway, thank you so much. Mo, I'll turn it back to you.
Thanks, Anna. Thanks, Congressman Gottheimer. Please pass our thanks on to Congressman Reed. It was nice of him to yield the remainder of his time to you. And thank you for what you're doing. I'm not as skeptical as Anna may be, but I appreciate the effort to work together and the results that you're able to get from that. I want to thank
I'm going to, by the way, just say, I've thought about your question more. Yes, I think that members of the Problem Solvers will be in leadership, and I think as soon as next Congress is my prediction. Heard
it here first.
There you go, Palmer.
Thank you. A little news here, a little nugget. I appreciate that.
I want to thank our campus partners, the Bipartisan Coalition, and both Georgetown College Dems and Georgetown College Republicans for helping us organize the event. I want to give a very special thanks to my good friend Anna Palmer, former GU Politics Fellow with Punchbowl News. Please check them out, sign up. Get their morning newsletter. If you care at all about what's going on the Hill and in Washington, it provides such important context every morning before the rest of the news ecosystem corrupts your brain. You'll know what the real scoop is. So thank you, Anna, for being a part of this.
Thank you.
Thanks to all of you for spending part of your evening with us. Come back on Monday for our next event, Speaking for America. Featuring two former School of Foreign Service faculty, Ned Price, who currently is the State Department spokesperson, and John Kirby, who is currently the Pentagon spokesperson, who are going to be talking a little bit about their jobs, speaking on behalf of the United States in the international affairs and national security space. And it will be moderated by Marie Harf, another former GU Politics Fellow, former State Department official, and we're proud to be partnered with the School of Foreign Service on that event. So stay tuned for more details. Thank you all for being a part of this. Have a great night.